If you've ever found yourself deep in the heart of a forest, away from the hustle and bustle of civilization, you know the unnerving sense of isolation that can creep up on you, and at times it can get a bit scary, especially knowing that if something were to happen to you, no one would know. It's not just the rustling leaves or the occasional snap of a twig that sets you on edge, but the feeling that you're being watched by something also gives you that feeling of fear. Well, that's how I felt the summer of 2019, in the dense, shadowy expanse of the forest I went to. This is my story. I had always been a hiker, drawn to the untouched beauty of nature. My friends often joke that I was born in the wrong era, better suited to a time when explorers charted unknown territories. Well, that summer, I decided to venture into my local forest, a place infamous for its eerie atmosphere and unsettling legends. Armed with my backpack, a tent, and my trusty camera, I set off. The first few days were blissful, filled with the soothing sounds of chirping birds and the rustling of leaves in the wind. The deeper I went, the more serene it became, with towering trees forming a protective canopy from above. It wasn't until the fourth day, though, that I noticed something strange. I had set up camp by a small crystal-clear stream. As dusk fell, I decided to venture a bit further to capture some shots of the forest bathed in the soft and golden light of the setting sun. But that's when I saw something. At first, it was just a figure, darting between the trees. I dismissed it as a deer or maybe even a bear. But then I heard the sound. An unnerving, unknown growling noise that sent shivers down my spine. It was unlike any animal I had ever heard, and it had me just about trip over my camera equipment as I stumbled backwards. I quickly snapped a few pictures in the direction of the sound, hoping to catch a glimpse of whatever was out there. But when I reviewed the photos later, all I saw were blurry shapes and indistinguishable sun glares. That night, sleep eluded me. The forest, usually filled with the soothing sounds of nocturnal creatures, was eerily silent. It was as if every living thing had sensed the presence of a predator and gone into hiding. Around midnight I heard it again, the growl, closer this time. My heart pounded in my chest as I strained to listen. Then, the sound of heavy footsteps crunching on the underbrush. Whatever it was large and getting closer. I grabbed my flashlight and cautiously unzipped my tent. The beam of light cut through the darkness, revealing nothing but trees and shadows. I took a step outside, my breath visible in the cool night air. Then I saw it again. Standing about 50 yards away, partially obscured by the trees, was a massive figure. It stood on two legs, towering over me. Its eyes glowed a menacing red in the light of my flashlight. For a moment, we were both frozen, locked in a staring standoff. Suddenly, it let out a deafening roar and charged. I barely had time to react, diving back into my tent and zipping it up in a panic. The creature stopped just short of the tent, its heavy breathing audible as it circled around. I remained quiet. Well, the best I could, while breathing heavy due to fear and anxiety. Mainly knowing that I went to that location without my hunting rifle, and I was kicking myself at the moment because of it. And while I sat still in my tent, the thought came into my mind that I was going to die, and that whatever animal it was that came at me was going to definitely kill me, and there was nothing I could have done to stop it, because whatever it is, was massive. But it couldn't be what I was thinking it was, there's no way. But my time of being in my head was brought to a halt. Right when I heard it walk up to my tent, and that thing was so close, I could smell it, which caused me to almost cough out, and thankfully I didn't, because I didn't want to anger it more than what it already was. At one point I could have swore that I heard it say something, at least it sounded like it. But it wasn't words, it was more like mouth sounds, if that makes sense, and it was like it was communicating with something else. Or maybe I'm wrong, maybe it was just a sneeze that an animal does as well as us humans. I don't know, but I will tell you this, there are more than just regular animals roaming our forests, and I used to think that people were crazy when they told me stories, or when I would watch videos online of people's supposed encounters. But now, I would like to apologize, for I am now myself a believer, now that I too have had my own personal experience with something supernatural. I could hear the sound of it sniffing the air, followed by a low, rumbling grunt. Then, just as quickly as it had appeared, it was gone, disappearing back into the shadows of the forest. My guess, it was trying to scare me. I could hear its loud steps thumping and crunching the leaves, until they were no longer in earshot. I did not want to remain there afterwards, but I was scared that it was hiding out there somewhere, just waiting for me to leave my tent. So I just sat inside, trying to stay awake, until I finally gave up and fell asleep. The next morning, I decided to cut my trip short. Whatever it was that was out there, I didn't want to stick around to find out. I packed up my camp and started the long trek back to my truck. Then hopefully, back to civilization. The whole time, constantly looking over my shoulder, hoping not to see that thing rushing towards me again, which thankfully it did not. The forest, which had once felt like my second home, now seemed scary and hostile. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig set my nerves on edge. I walked for hours, the disturbing silence only broken by the occasional call of a distant bird. As night fell, I knew I wouldn't make it out of the forest before dark. So I found a small clearing and reluctantly set up camp, keeping my flashlight and camera within arm's reach. Sleep was out of the question. I sat by the fire, trying to keep my mind occupied and my fear at bay. But around midnight the growling started again. This time, it was accompanied by the sound of branches snapping and something heavy moving through the underbrush. It was tracking me. I grabbed my flashlight and camera, heart pounding. The creature emerged from the trees, its eyes glowing with a malevolent eeriness. It was closer this time, its massive form clearly visible in the firelight. It stood over 8 feet tall, covered in dark, matted fur. Its face was a twisted, nightmarish version of a human's, with elongated features and sharp, yellow teeth. I raised my camera and snapped a picture, the flash momentarily blinding the creature. It let out an enraged roar and charged. I stumbled backwards, tripping over my backpack and fell to the ground, dropping my camera in the process, that the beast then stepped on as it moved closer. The creature stopped just short of me, its hot, rancid breath washing over my face. For a moment, I thought it was going to kill me, but then, it turned and disappeared into the forest again, leaving me trembling and terrified on the ground. So I made up my mind right then and there, that I'm not waiting until morning to leave. I packed up my camp in the dark and started running, not caring about the path or direction. I just needed to get out. The forest seemed to close in around me, the trees forming an impenetrable barrier. Hours passed of me walking through the thick brush, in a blur of fear and exhaustion, and just as dawn was breaking, I stumbled upon a dirt road. I followed it, praying it would lead me to safety. Eventually, thank God, I came across a small ranger station, and I couldn't have been more relieved, so I ran up to and knocked on the door. The ranger on duty took one look at my disheveled appearance and let me in, and between gasps for breath, I told him what had happened. His expression grew grim as he listened. When I was done, he nodded and handed me a cup of water and a sandwich he pulled from a small fridge. "You're not the first," he said quietly. "We've had reports of strange sightings in this forest for years. People talk about Sasquatch, often reporting their sightings. And most don't make it out to tell the tale." I shuddered, the memory of the creature's glowing eyes still fresh in my mind, and the thought of it following had me feeling sick to my stomach. The ranger offered to drive me to my truck, and I gratefully accepted, because I just wanted to get as far away from that forest as I could. In the weeks that followed, I tried to put the experience behind me. But the nightmares persisted, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still being watched. And my friends, though sympathetic, found it hard to believe my story. I just wish I could have got the pictures I had taken, but in my rush to get away from that thing, I just left my broken camera laying out there. Maybe one day someone will find it, and reveal to the world that creature exists. Determined to find some closure, I began researching similar encounters. I found countless stories of people who had encountered strange ape-like creatures in remote forests. They all described the same unnerving feeling of being hunted, the same glowing eyes and weird growls. Some called it Bigfoot, others the devil. But whatever it was, I knew it was real. And it was still out there, lurking in the dark, waiting for its next victim. To this day, I can't venture into a forest without feeling a sense of unease. The memory of that summer in my local forest still haunts me, a constant reminder of the dangers that await in the wilderness. If you ever find yourself deep in the woods, and you hear an unknown deep demonic-like growl, turn back. Because sometimes, legends are true. And some creatures are better off, left undiscovered.